What's up, everybody? My name is James DiFiore, and this is Blackballed. I'm really excited about our show today. We have two guests. Later on in the show, we'll be speaking to biostatistician uh, Ryan Imgrund, and we're going to talk to him about a bunch of stuff. But first, and I know he's in a hurry, so I'll get right to it. We have the leader of the People's Party of Canada. His name is Max Bernier, and Max, welcome back to Blackball. How are you, buddy?
Yes, great. Thank you very much for that invitation. I'm very pleased to be with you and taking the time to answer your questions.
Good. I would like to treat this like a conversation, so I don't want any media training stuff because I can spot that
It's
stuff a mile away.
no, I'm not like that.
Okay. I know that you want to do politics differently. Remember that. You don't have to tell me
Yeah.
that. I already know. I'm gonna put up a picture, and then I'm gonna ask you a question, and then we'll get this conversation going. When this happened at Queen's Park, to be honest, I can't even remember the protest. It was a couple years ago, I think, at Queen's Park. And I believe it was health cuts or education cuts. It doesn't even matter to me because the point of this picture and the reason why I'm showing you this picture is because when this came out, I thought it was disgusting. I thought it was abhorrent. I support their right to, to exercise their right to free speech. And I exercise my right by calling them assholes for doing it. I just think that there's nothing worse than that. The reason why I'm showing you that is because I think that there's a point of agreement that you and I would have, one of a few, I'm sure, where I find that the rigid left has sort of an infallibility complex, where they do things like that, and they seem to have all these amazing reasons as to why they do it, and the ends justify the means and all that kind of stuff. We both know that the left can be wrong about a lot of things. And so I am curious, because you're on the other side of the political spectrum, are you able to entertain the idea that you're wrong about a bunch of stuff when it comes to this pandemic?
Yeah, absolutely. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But I'm looking at the data. I'm looking at the science. I'm looking, at what happened in other countries, and that's why I believe that our position on COVID-19 was the best one, and the one that we didn't follow as a country. But I believe that was a huge mistake, and history will tell us if I'm right or wrong. But I'm not a doctor, but I can read report. I can read, and I know that we didn't protect the most vulnerable, specifically in Quebec and in Ontario. That was under the responsibility of these two provincial governments, and they did very bad. We have two reports about that: one in Ontario, one in Quebec. So yeah, it's and now I believe that it's not a question of vaccinated people against unvaccinated people. It's a question just to regain our freedoms and our lives back like before COVID-19 for everybody.
What are you afraid of as far as losing liberty and losing freedom? What legislation can you point to? What lessons in history do you think that we have to adhere to in order to save ourselves from what you seem to describe as tyranny? Like I'm hoping you can be specific, like, and you can point to the legislation rather than just sort of saying that the government
Yeah.
is.
Yeah, for
Go ahead.
sure. In Quebec, in Ontario, we are still under the emergency state. There's no emergency anymore. The last variant, Omicron, it's like a big flu. That's it. And now we are still under that emergency order in Quebec and also in Ontario and maybe in other provinces. And there's no emergency. There's no reason not to have debates in parliaments, not to be able to fly across the country. Like actually today, I'll give you a scoop. Today, in an hour, I will table a suit a case against the federal government for me not being able to travel as an unvaccinated Canadian. I cannot travel by plane in our country. That's against my constitutional rights. and it's illegal. So, a democratic country won't do that. And the worst of that is, remember, all these establishment politicians, they were saying to push everybody to take the two shots, and their goal was to make our lives more difficult, miserable. They said that in Quebec. And, we're going to push on a vaccine passport. I won't be able to go to a restaurant, and I'm not able to go to a restaurant in Quebec or to a gym. And, that's not respecting my rights. And when they're doing that, when they're imposing that by not passing a legislation and having a debate in l'Assemblée nationale au Québec and in Parliament in Ontario, when you use the state emergency with a decree, you said that I don't have this right, and there's no debate in the House, there's no debate in Parliament. That's not a democracy. That's tyranny. They are imposing their point of view without having to debate in the Parliament.
But a lot of this has to do with a disagreement on what the science is. And this has been with us in a big way since, I would say, February, March 2020. And it was always seen as, from most of us, it was always seen as a very fluid situation. That what was true one day was not necessarily true the next. Excuse me, the evolution of the virus, the unvaccinated, or the vaccination rate not happening as fast as medical professionals would have liked it to happen. Wasn't there a time where you might have had some pause and in order to gather the facts in an ever-changing situation? Like you guys have stayed, when I say you guys, I mean yourself, your party, your supporters, and the people at these convoys and the protests. You guys have remained consistent in a situation that wasn't consistent. So, and what I'm trying to get at is that you could have been right, but then you were wrong for 4 months, and then maybe you were right again. Like, don't you find that this situation is so difficult and so complex that it would be impossible to say, yeah, I've been right the whole time?
No, the situation was the same. I must admit that in the beginning of that pandemic, the first maybe 2 months, I was not sure. But after that, we had cases coming from other countries and data coming from other countries, and saying that, the most vulnerable are older people with comorbidities. And actually, that was a fact. That what happened in Quebec and in Canada, 80% of the deaths were people older with comorbidities. That's why early in the beginning, I decided not to take the two shots. Because, I'm 59 years old, I'm in shape, I'm running every day, I don't have any comorbidities. And I looked at the data at that time, and my chances of surviving if I had COVID was 0.95%. So I said, I don't need that vaccine. And actually, I was right, because last October, I had COVID-19, the Delta variant, and I was in my bed for maybe 3 days, and after that everything was okay. So now I have very good antibodies, and I'm okay. So we had the data early in the beginning, and we had some experts that time will tell us that they were right. The great Burlington Declaration. They said, let's open the economy, protect the most vulnerable, and no mask, and no. They were right at that time. So, and it's too bad. It's too bad what they did to the economy. $500 billion deficit in the last 2 years. And we are paying for that right now by the inflation rate at 4.8. In US, it's at 7%. It will go up. Inflation is a hidden tax. Some people lost their job because they decided not to take the two shots. Students were not able to finish their university degree because they decided not to take the two shots. It's crazy. And now we know there's no scientific it's not based on anything, imposing a vaccine passport. We know that everybody can catch and spread that virus. But I must admit, I always said that in the beginning. My dad is 87 years old, and I told my dad he has comorbidities. You must take the vaccine. I'm looking at the data, and he took the 2 shots, but he doesn't want to take the third one. He said, no, I took the 2 shots. It was supposed to be enough. And now that variant is a flu, and I had flu before that in my life, and I won't take the third shot. I said, it's your decision. But we knew that in the beginning to protect the most vulnerable. And now you have a population in Canada that's divided because of Trudeau and establishment politicians that are saying that we are racist and xenophobe and white supremacists because we protest. Yes, I understand what is happening on the bridge. What's the name of that bridge in Ontario?
The Ambassador Bridge, I think.
Ambassador Bridge, yeah. It's hurting a lot of businesses. But, that's a kind of a civil disobedience. And I agree with that. After 2 years, what they did, I agree with that. If you want to stop all that, you just have to end all these mandates, like in other countries, like in Florida, like in Texas. I was in Florida, like I maybe told you before, for a month. And, you don't have COVID-19 news every time you turn on the news. I don't watch TV anymore. I don't listen to the mainstream radio station. In Quebec, it's all about COVID-19. And I said that in the beginning. People must learn to live with that virus and stop to live in fear. And so now 30% of the population are saying enough is enough. When we started that, maybe we had only 8% of the population. But thanks to Omicron, because everybody knows somebody that had it, and it was like the flu. So now they understand, okay, why all that? It's for a flu. So thanks to Omicron, and thanks also to Trudeau when he imposed that vax pass for the truckers.
You sound like you're accepting an Oscar, like you're thanking all the people that helped you get here.
Yeah, but Trudeau, he helped us, because he helped us to show to every Canadian that it's not based on logic. These truckers were essential workers in the beginning of the pandemic. They were the only one that were able to cross our borders, and it was closed for everybody else. We didn't have any vaccine at that time. And now, 2 years later, they are a danger for the population if they cross without having the vaccine. And we know that everybody can spread it. We know that they're alone in their truck. So, now the common sense prevails and people understand. So thanks to Trudeau, thanks to Macron, more people understand that we must live with that virus and all these variants that will come and go back to our life.
So there's a bunch there I want to get to. But the first thing I want to ask is, and I've heard you say this before, so this isn't controversial, that, and you just said it again, that we need to protect the most vulnerable. How do you reconcile protecting the most vulnerable with a big swath of the population not getting vaccinated and then therefore making the vulnerable more susceptible to the disease?
Yeah, actually, they told us, take that vaccine, it will help you, that's for you, but also you're doing that for other people, for the people that you love. They won't catch that virus. That was a lie. Now we have a pandemic of vaccinated people.
Okay, so but
the vaccine is only good to protect yourself against severe COVID, and that's it. That vaccine does not protect for the transmission of the virus. Everybody can catch it.
Okay, but can we just clear something up before you continue?
Protect everybody and yourself. That was a lie.
Right, but before we go on to that, because I really want to nail this down, because I'm a little bit confused, because it does seem like you're contradicting yourself just a little bit, and the reason why is because, is it a lie? Was that a lie, or did they get it wrong?
When you push a vaccine like that and you're telling the population, remember they told us 2 shots would be okay. You'll have a protection for a long term, and now it's 3 shot or 4 shot. I don't know. I don't count them anymore. But they were saying that, and they were saying when 70% of the population would be vaccinated, that would be it. And that's not the case. They are pushing for more people. So what I'm telling you, if they said that, our politicians said that to us, and they told us at that time that was based on science. So
Okay,
sorry, that's why I'm saying it was a lie, because we
right,
know
but
that it was not based on science at all.
it was based on pharmaceutical research, right? And look, I'm not I don't carry water for big pharma, right? But at the same time, I don't think that every single thing that they do is wrong. So I'm wondering. I asked. I had a guest on the show, doctor on the show on Tuesday, and I asked him, because they overestimated the efficacy rate of the vaccine. Doesn't it still mean that being vaccinated is more protection than not? And he said absolutely, and that's the
And I agree with
consensus.
that. I agree with that. It's a protection for yourself if you have comorbidities against severe COVID. You will have less chances to go to emergency room if you have comorbidities and you had the vaccine. Yes, the vaccine can be um, uh, efficient and for these people.
But it helps the most vulnerable. It helps the people with pre-existing conditions, people who have diabetes, people who are overweight, people who are old. If the rest of
Absolutely.
the population, if the healthy people are vaccinated, like that would help the vulnerable. Correct?
Yeah, but it's like if you're telling me, take every year the vaccine for the flu. If you take that vaccine, you won't have the flu, and you will help everybody else. So, but that was not mandatory to take the vaccine for the flu a couple of years ago, and every year when they have that vaccine. So why a vaccine like that you can transmit that virus? And you're saying, I cannot have the right to travel and to sit in a plane, and I have antibodies. They don't recognize my antibodies, and they're better. Doctors are saying and telling me that your antibodies are better than a vaccine. Natural antibodies, natural immunity, it's better than an immunity coming from a vaccine. It's a fact in medicine. So now they don't. I had COVID. I had all the proof about that. I had the Delta variant. My wife also, and I'm like at risk. I'm not at risk. So I cannot sit with somebody that took the 2 shots and maybe can transmit the virus. I had
But it's
good
not.
antibodies.
I'll get off this after this question because in a way we're going nowhere because I feel really strongly about the science, and I know that you feel strongly about the science too. But our science is different because the science that I'm familiar with, what seems to be the medical consensus among professional medical personnel, is that they overestimated the efficacy rate of the vaccine, but those who are vaccinated still had a much better chance of dealing with this than people who were unvaccinated. And I know that you have antibodies because you had COVID and all that. But given that there were so many people who were vulnerable in our society, and I know that you have a staunch libertarian stance on this. I'm going to give you an example. Okay. I remember, I think it was a Michael Moore documentary from years and years ago. I don't share his politics, so that's not why I'm bringing it up. But he was interviewing somebody, he was interviewing a Timothy McVeigh accomplice, I think. And they were talking about gun rights. They were actually talking about the right to bear arms. And I think it was Michael Moore asked this guy, where does it end? Should every American have the right to a tactical nuke? And he was like, yeah, because there's going to be people who will use it responsibly. And then there was another guy who's a pro-gun guy that said no. So for a lot of people, there is sort of a cap when it comes to their ideology and their beliefs. When it comes to pandemics, I mean, would it have to be leprosy in order for you to be like, okay, maybe the government has a point for making us stay indoors? Like, is there a cap for you? Or is it like, it doesn't matter? It doesn't matter if it's the bubonic plague. I need my liberty. I should be able to do what I want. Or is there a reasonable cap for Maxime Bernier?
Uh, you know, there's not. When you started that, you're telling people, the state and the politician will tell you what to do with your own body. For me, it's not acceptable. And actually, maybe we'll see. I'm anxious to see in a couple of months or year from now what will be the history of all that, and we'll have the data in every country, and we have some. And I can tell you, I said that was an experiment, a failed experiment, and we had a study from the Johns Hopkins University that said, mass mandate lockdowns were inefficient. And we'll have more studies like that. We'll see what will happen. But I can tell you, for the first time in history, shutting down the country, and look how the perverse effects with the population. Suicide rate is increasing, and depression, and young people at school that they have to wear a mask every day when they are at their desk. I'm not anti-mask, I'm not anti-vax, I'm for freedom of choice. Everybody must be free to decide, and for kids, it must be the parents who must decide if the kids will wear a mask or not. So
Maxime Bernier,
we're not in a free society anymore. That's why, for me, when the state is telling you what you must have in your bodies, and don't forget, it's an experimental vaccine until next year. And that vaccine and these vaccines were approved under emergency status and as an experimentation.
Right. Well, two things. One, so you're pro leprosy? No, I'm just kidding. But the other thing would be that the vaccines have proven to be safe, right? Like So
and good for people, like you just said before, that had comorbidities. I know that in our movement there are some people that are saying, the vaccine they're not good. We must end that. I'm not a doctor. But I believe, and I saw that the vaccine was very good for people with comorbidities. And like I said, but other people that are saying, the vaccine that was the disaster, they were not efficient. We'll see in the near future. But for me, I think for people at risk, that's why I said to my dad, take it, and he took it.
Okay. Let's get off vaccines. And now I'm going to preamble this by letting you know that I do not believe in guilt by association. The first time since I've been interested in politics that I've seen guilt by association be used in a nefarious way was probably Jeremiah Wright and Barack Obama. I didn't care that he had a preacher that said what he said. Obama didn't say it. It didn't matter to me. So I am not saying that you ascribe to these beliefs, but you are sitting 2 feet away, and I just want your opinion on this.
By God's grace, we're going to show the population what it means to get back on the foundation. When you pull the foundation out, the house will not stand. By God's grace, I will stand and speak for God as long as I can. God bless you.
It sounded a lot like he believes that Jesus is like an essential ingredient in the casserole of democracy. Would you agree?
He has the right to believe that. What he was saying, if you read our Constitution, it's a fact. You read the Constitution, and that said that it was founded on God, and yet there's a sentence in our Constitution that related to God. But that's a fact. That being said, I believe in democracy, and we don't have that anymore in Canada right now with their emergency status everywhere. And we must end all that. But yes, I was at the press conference, and the pastor were there also, and with other people, the pastor and other people. And the fact that I was there, I had a specific message. And I think all these people, are fighting to end these mandates, and some of them are different arguments. And I was with doctors that are saying at the same press conference that the vaccine is no good. The vaccine is not good, and everybody must say no to the vaccine. Actually, that's not what I said.
I'm just wondering if you. I'm just wondering if you agree with the underlying message. That's all. That it is a steadfast requirement that a Judeo-Christian underpinning prop up, become the foundation of our society? Or do you think that we can have a functioning society without Jesus?
I believe that we can without, absolutely, yeah.
Okay, good. And we'll end it. We'll end that line of questioning right there, because I'm so happy you said that, by the way. Listen, the convoy does have some problems. I don't know how you peg down a percentage, okay? But I'm familiar with Pat King. I'm sure you are too. He's an avowed racist. It's clear from the video footage that I've seen. He's also seems to be one of the organizers. Does the right, and I'm generalizing on purpose, but does the right, and especially the sort of hard right, have a problem not being able to excise, in the same manner, by the way, that the far left has not been able to excise the extremists in their midst? Why does the right have such a hard time turning their backs on the extremists in theirs?
Well, first of all, look for the left. In the U.S., the Black Lives Matter. They're communists, and what they did in the summer 2020, that was violent, and that was extreme left. And we don't have that in our side. All that, everything that is happening in Ottawa right now, it's peaceful. There's no violence. And so if you want to speak about extreme in one side and the other side, I believe that in the left, they are with, they have a lot of extremists also on that side, and maybe more than us. But that's a society. But look at the people that were there at that manifestation. I call that a rally last weekend and the weekend before. Ordinary Canadians that are dancing in the street and saying, enough is enough. We want to regain our freedoms. And that was great. So that's a grassroots movement coming from every part of the country. And yes, you can have some extreme in that. But what I didn't like, it's the mainstream media focused and Justin Trudeau on that. And he said that everybody was white supremacist and racist. And that was another lie. And so
yeah, I'm not holding water for Justin Trudeau either. So I know we're polarized. I feel like I largely like a spectator when it comes to this stuff. But as a spectator, I'm keeping my eyes on what's going on. And I see the left and the right having a very similar problem. They explain away the extremist in their midst, violent or not. Beliefs can be extreme as well. And both sides just sort of shrug instead of being proactive. And I think I understand why. We just saw Aaron O'Toole lose his leadership, and I'm fairly certain he lost his leadership because before the last election he pivoted to the center and said goodbye to lots of libertarians and lots of people that would support you. So there's a political calculation more so than a moral calculation. Would you agree with that?
Well, for the conservative, yes. For us, no. When we created the People's Party of Canada, and like I said, we are doing politics differently because we
I
don't
told
do
you
any
you're not
voting.
allowed to say that anymore, Maxime. You can't. I already know.
But I want people to understand that we are running always on the same platform. So when we started that, because we have a position on immigration, for example, that we want fewer immigrants, people were saying our opponents were saying that we were racist. That's not true. And I said, people that must come in our party must share our platform and our vision and our principle. If they don't like that, they can go and create their own party. So I was very strict about it and very clear. And I'm very proud of what we did. We are growing the party step by step. And the next campaign will be on the same platform. So that's the big difference between us at the PPC and the Conservative Party of Canada that, saying something a day and the opposite the other day. And so, no, we will say also, we believe it's too bad for my opponent, but I believe that I have the best idea. I believe that I have the best vision for this country. I believe that I'm right on COVID-19. Maybe I'm wrong, but I believe that strongly. And I believe that if I'm speaking about my values openly with passion and conviction, we'll have more support. So I'm not looking at the poll today that we are maybe at 10%. I'm looking at in 5 years or 2 years, we may be at 20%. We are growing step by step.
Do you I don't know how to word this properly. Is there a way that you can foresee your party being able to reach across the spectrum in a way that's meaningful? Like I mean like an ambidextrous philosophy towards governing the country. So you are a right-wing politician. I don't mean that disparagingly, but you're a right of center. You're a conservative. I think that I have anecdotal examples in my own social circle of progressives who voted for you in the last election. But there are certain things. I'll give you an example. You probably believe that the government should be, the federal government specifically, should be smaller. Is that a fair thing to say?
Yes.
Okay. Then why are a lot of the protesters who are in Ottawa keep on citing the federal mandate for federal employees, which is roughly 420,000 people, and that is a pool of employees that most staunch conservatives, they don't even want those jobs to exist because they want to shrink government. But yet now they're all worried about the mandates that those federal employees who have jobs that they don't even want to exist have to endure. That's kind of a paradox, isn't it?
No, because we care, and that mandate for federal civil servants, it is a fact, it is there, but also the worst, the federal government said to regulated industries that they must do the same in telecom industry, and some private corporation are doing the same. So when you start mandates and it's growing in other industries, we need to fight that, and we are fighting against all mandates. But they understand, these people know that we want a smarter government, less civil servant, a government that won't interfere in provincial jurisdiction, actually a radical decentralization. That's the only solution if we want to keep this country alive. There are separatists in Quebec, separatists in Alberta, and there's a reason for that, because the government does not respect the Constitution. We're the only one. So we need to go back to what the father of our Constitution, the father of our country did in 1867. And if you respect that Constitution, you won't have any fight in between provinces. And yes, you'll have a province that will have more private delivery in healthcare, maybe, another province that will have more socialism. That will be their choice. But you're right saying that I believe in a smarter government. I believe in lower taxes, more autonomy to provinces. I want to fight for Canadian sovereignty. That's all part of our platform. And if some of your viewers don't know us, they can go on our website, peoplespartyofcanada.ca, read our platform.
You're plugging.
Be the same at the
Stop plugging, Max. They know who you are. Everyone knows who you are. It's fine. One of the things that stood out for me for this convoy is the lack of savvy among organizers, the lack of a strategy. The fact that it started off as a protest against trucker mandates. As far as I know, you can't get into the United States if you're a trucker unless you're vaccinated because of a President Biden policy. So I don't know what Trudeau has to do with that. The second thing is that it feels like there's a co-opt culture when it comes to this convoy, because it started off for that. It seemed like that was a Joe Biden decision. They put it at Trudeau's feet. Okay. And then there was supposedly a supply chain issue. But then we found out like a few days later that the supply chain issue there's been a issue throughout the pandemic, and the issue has sort of stayed the same. But now the supply chain issue is a direct cause from the convoy. You talked about the Ambassador Bridge. We can talk about, the truckers stopping people from going to work. It's bad for the economy. I don't remember many people right of center standing up and applauding Indigenous protesters who were using their own version of civil disobedience and blockading the railroads. Can we at least identify that there is hypocrisy? There's plenty to go around, but the people in the convoy are not absolved from this hypocrisy, are they?
But first, yes, you're right. What is happening right now, it's a decision from the federal government and also from the U.S. government concerning the truckers, both of them. You're absolutely right, and I said that in the beginning. But actually, just before you, I did an interview with a mainstream TV station in Washington, D.C. Tomorrow I'll do an interview with a German mainstream television. I did one in French yesterday. So all these mainstream media are looking at our country. And now you have convoy in the US that will start from California to go to Washington, D.C. And that will have an impact. So I believe that, the US will look at their policy concerning truckers. And I hope that they will end these mandates from them also. Canada must do the same thing. Absolutely, Trudeau can do his part, but we need the U.S. government also to do their part. And I understand that there are some people in the U.S. that are pushing for that also. But not only in the U.S., in other countries. Why we still have this mandate in Canada when it's all open in other countries in Europe? And so there's no reason, and that's why more people are coming on side with the truckers. Yes, but it will hurt. I agree with you. It will hurt the economy if that bridge is closed for a couple of days or months. But look at what they did to the economy the last 2 years. $500 billion deficit, and we are paying for that. People that are losing their job, university students that cannot have their degree because they decided not to have the 2 shots, depression, suicide, all that, we are paying for that, and we'll pay for that for the next 5-10 days. The only way to pay for that deficit would be through inflation. And inflation is there to stay, because inflation, it's based on money printing, and the Bank of Canada printed a lot of money for the Trudeau government to be able to do this deficit. So that being said, yes, that's why it's a real, like you said, civil disobedience. And I'm supporting that. When your freedoms and your rights are in danger, and it must end. There's no reason. There's no scientific reason. There's no logic. Everybody can catch and spread that virus. The virus is not dangerous anymore. So let's end that. And I agree with them. And I hope that Trudeau will understand and stop all that. You can stop that impact on the economy. It's very easy. Trudeau just have to have a meeting with his counterparts at the provincial level and say, okay, we will end that. We won't give you any compensation for lockdowns and things like that. Trudeau can end it. And I'm very pleased that they did that in Saskatchewan. They will do that in Alberta.
Well, that was going to be my next point, and I know we only have a few minutes left. I know that, but my next point was just going to be history might look at this, and I'll play devil's advocate for you, because history might look at this as a massive protest for something that was clearly temporary, and they might view it as a great recruiting strategy for yourself, maybe Randy Hillier, although he's kind of dropped off the deep end recently, don't you think, a little bit?
But no, not temporarily. We were under emergency, state of emergency for the last 2 years. That's not temporary. I cannot travel, since last October.
But do you think that it was nefarious, though, Max? Max, do you think that this is probably the key question to all of this? Because I see a lot of fuck Trudeau flags, and you know what's funny? I don't think he's a good leader at all. I didn't vote for him. I didn't vote Liberals. I would not vote. In fact, I'm on record saying I won't vote for Liberals or Conservatives until a different party.
Welcome. You can support us.
It's you or jug meat, because I am not ideological. I just don't think that the revolving door of win the election, get embroiled in scandals, get voted out, win the election, get embroiled in scandals, get voted out. You remember, because you were part of the revolving door and you had a couple scandals, right?
Yeah.
And so, but the point is that, this looks like a great recruiting tool for you. And what do you think? I'm going to ask you a political question, actually. What do you think the Conservatives now pivoting again back to what used to be their base, which is people that have kind of a religious bent, pro-life people, people that are just a little more far right than than a moderate conservative. You know, that is a direct reaction to this convoy and probably to the percentage that they saw that you received during the last election. You didn't win a seat, but your percentage of the popular vote, I don't think the Green Party has ever even achieved that before. So are you, you know, I mean, Max, I wish that it was just me and you in a bar sometimes, because I feel like you would lean in and be like, James, it's good for the party, you know, or something like. There's a strategist in there somewhere, right? Like, you know that this is good for you.
Where are you now? Where are you?
I'm in Killaloe. I'm near Barry's Bay. I'm in Cheryl Gallant's riding.
So it can take time. I can drive over there and we can have a beer.
Okay.
But I'm very busy. I hope I'll be able to have a beer with you. Absolutely. But
don't be a tease. Don't tell me that you'll come here and have a beer and then tell me you're busy. That's not nice.
No, but I don't have time right now. You know, I have to build that party. I want to have your support, yes, but I need to build a strong organization across the country, and that's what I'm working on. But I'm pretty sure that before the next election, I'll be sure to travel in your region and have a beer with you.
Okay,
that's my promise. And I'm, you know, I'm doing politics differently, like you know, so I will respect that promise.
Okay, but if you come here, we can have a beer. You have to smoke a little bit of weed, just for it's a tradition in my house. Okay, just a little bit. Okay. It's legal. Don't worry about it. It'll be fine. And then the last thing I just want to say before we go is that I think it would have been really powerful if there was more footage of the convoy where people who were supporting the message of the I Hate Trudeau salad bar, from socks to mandates, come one, come all. If supporters of the protest would have gone up to some of the stuff, as anecdotal as they may have been, and said, get your fucking Nazi flags out of here. You're not welcome here. I want to see footage like that. And I think it would do your movement a lot of good. It really would.
Yeah, but actually that person that has that flag, when I was there the first weekend, my team saw him and he was coming near me and because he wanted to be in the shot of the camera and the media. And my people went to him and said, who are you? He didn't answer. And he had a mask. And he said, we don't want you near Maxime. And the guy respected that. And he went away. But that was the only flag. That was not representative of the crowd over there. That's why I'm very mad about the mainstream media and Trudeau. That said, it's all a bunch of racists because of one guy that was there. You know, one guy on maybe 20,000 people. That the first
there was a few. I've seen some footage. There was a few, but either way, Max, I'll let you go. You don't need to take my advice. I'm going to give it anyways, unsolicited. I think your primary message for the next few days should be that of nonviolence. I think that you will, I mean, literally on like a redundant message of, let's not be violent. Let's not provoke. Let's respect the police. Let's exercise our rights. We don't need violence. And I think that maybe you might come out looking a lot better than Randy Hillier. Come on. There's something wrong with him right now. Is he drunk all the time, Max?
James, I just want to let you know, I said that in my press conference yesterday. You know, peaceful, no violence. And so I will always repeat that. You know, I won't be with people that, you know, look, the mainstream media, when the leftists in the U.S. and the Black Lives Matter destroy downtowns in certain cities in the U.S., nobody was, the mainstream media was there, and that was okay. So we have one guy with a flag, and that was a bunch of racists. So that's why, you know. Yeah,
it's just important. It's just important. Okay, I will let you go, please. If you give Randy Hillier an intervention, can you film it and send me the footage, please? Can we do that?
I'll try. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks. Maxime Bernier, everybody. Thanks very much, Max. I appreciate you coming by. We'll have you on again, okay?
Thank you, James. Have a nice day.
Okay. You too. Au revoir. Maxime Bernier, leader of the People's Party of Canada. We'll do the post-mortem on that in a moment because I want to invite my next guest on the show now. He is and I love saying this word, he is a biostatistician. It's like the greatest word to say when you're not drunk. If I was still a drinker, I would never be able to say that word, but here we are. Ryan Imgrund. Ryan, how are you, buddy?
Not too bad.
Good, yourself? No, I'm doing great, man. I'm doing great. That was Max Bernier talking a lot about not getting vaccinated and stuff. When you hear, I don't know if you caught the part of the interview about vaccines and stuff, but when you hear a person basically say that they're going to trade the possible, a possible health crisis for others in exchange for a little piece of liberty, what goes through your mind?
Yeah, I think it's very, very troubling. And I think it's a different kind of science when you take that approach to things. Because I think really the big thing is that you need to understand how vaccinations work. And vaccinations work if the public buys into them. If you don't have the public buying into vaccines, they're not going to work as well as they're supposed to. It's based off of herd immunity. It's based off of getting more people vaccinated. And when you have more people vaccinated, you can relax some of the interventions and some of the measures which you've stuck into play. But that's how vaccinations work, is public buy-in. And having a personal choice when it comes down to something which requires public buy-in, there's some problems with that. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I found it a little bit disturbing that he prioritized his liberty over leprosy.
Yeah. And you know what? We are starting to see this now. Even in some, southern states that have now even taken this whole, we don't want to have, a COVID-19 vaccine mandate. We're also going to get rid of the vaccine mandate for mumps, for rubella, for other conditions which we've had before. It's a very slippery slope the other way too. And I think that's what we really ignore sometimes, that we ignore the fact that it's a slippery slope the other way. And you can see some of these lawmakers now jumping on and wanting to get rid of vaccines for other things because we don't have them anymore. Well, we don't have them anymore because we have vaccine mandates. That's why most of these things aren't there anymore.
Yeah, it's an odd, I don't know. I hate this whole pandemic from one perspective, which is that I feel like a monkey trying to figure it out because I am not a doctor. I am certainly not a biostatistician. I'm not smart like that to be able to go, oh yeah, definitely. I have to trust people who are experts. And this is a good way to pivot into what I wanted to talk to you about mostly, which is that, people gravitate towards information that fits their narrative, right?
Yeah.
I feel I try my best not to have a narrative. I'm sure I have some, we all kind of do. In the pandemic, I don't know if you would call it a narrative. I'm just like, well, doctors seem like the right people to listen to. So I'm going to listen to doctors. And when I find people like, even in the chat here, like, gene therapy, this one person is saying, I've never met you, Mary. You might be really nice. But doctors tell me, I had a doctor on the show on Tuesday, it doesn't impact your DNA. It's a different kind of technology inside the vaccine that they found was effective. In fact, there's an AIDS vaccine that is really close to being put on market that is an mRNA vaccine as well, and they have like really high hopes for it. You work in numbers and data and facts and everything, and I see you get shit on all the time, and I see you fling that shit right back. What is the biggest misconception of the numbers that you put out, and what do people say your motivating factor is to fucking lie to everybody so much?
Yeah,
or to make them afraid. Yeah.
Yeah, you know what? I think the first thing is I basically put out data. And when I first started putting out data, I never gave an opinion along with the data. I never said what that data meant until, we had some politicians basically take my data and then use my data to say their own false narrative or to support a narrative that the data, in fact, supported the other way. I mean, I'll give you one example of that. Where I lost my mind. And I think a lot of people then assume that you're anti-school because of that. One really big thing that happened was we saw positivity in students increase right over the Christmas holidays. Now, what the government took that to mean is, well, we have positivity increasing, right at the start of the Christmas holidays. It's because schools are safe. And when they were on holidays, being in their household, that was not safe anymore. And I had this really good chart that was kind of out there that would, follow those cases. And sure enough, it would show cases in the younger population over Christmas holidays went down. But that was taken to mean that schools were safe. And that's definitely not what it was saying. And that's when I had to kind of, throw into there and say, the whole reason that we're thinking that positivity went down that first week of holidays, it reflects transmission from the previous week. And that previous week, we had students in school. And when you kind of put out that narrative, then all of a sudden people are saying, what, do you want to keep schools closed? What do you want to keep schools shut down? And I'm just simply saying schools were the reason that we saw the cases increase. It's not because of like Christmas holidays. So that was one of the first times that I, really commented on schools. And for the next week or 2 weeks, and then when the government announced that schools were remaining closed, I became the number one person to blame because I wanted schools closed, apparently.
And you were getting that primarily from the right, or were there progressives that were all mad at you too?
From everyone. I was getting it from parents. I was getting it from people who said we need to keep schools open. It was, really from a lot of people that were just ignorant to the data and just more ignorant to what I was saying. And really what I've always said all along is I want schools safe, and they're not as safe as they're supposed to be. And if you don't make schools safe and they're dangerous, you need to intervene sometimes. The best way to intervene would be to make the schools safer. But if you can't make the schools safer and they're a dangerous place, you may have to pivot to online.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I I make predictions sometimes off the cuff. I think Randy Hillier's probably drinking whiskey right now, for example. But your predictions is mathematical, and people can go back and look at what you said a week ago, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, and find out if you're right. Now, help me understand as a layperson. Do you have is there a batting average? Do you have a way of being able to communicate? Well, my predictions are right X amount of times, 92%. What is there a way to quantify that? And if so, what would that number be? Because I see you get shit on so much that I even asked you, I'm like, can you send me some of your mistakes so I can see what they are? Because people seem really mad. So
yeah, well, you know what? So basically a lot of the projections that I've made have been off of something called the reproduction value. And that's just simply a disease value. It's how many individuals one person with COVID-19 gets sick. Now, the good thing is, if we intervene, we can bring that value down. And in other words, it doesn't have to be that one person makes two people sick. If we intervene and we have N95 masks, we do other things like that. Maybe that a value goes down to 1.3 or 1 or whatever it goes down to. So basically, my projections are based off of a constant reproduction value. In other words, if we kept things status quo and we did nothing, this is what would happen. And I think at least what we've seen here in Ontario is that, there's been a lot of criticism too of the science table. But we always need to keep in mind that the science table always gives projections right before the government intervenes. So there was one where I think they had said that we're going up to 10,000 cases, and this was 2 Christmases ago. We never came close to 10,000 cases. Why not? Because we intervened. My modeling would have also showed at the time that we're going to hit 10,000 cases based off of a constant growth factor, but we can change that constant growth factor by intervening. So I can't win because either we reach that 10,000 or, we drop, and then I'm wrong because we don't reach the 10,000. And if we don't reach the 10,000, it's because we've intervened. And then people say, well, we intervened because you said that we're going to have 10,000 cases, and we never got close to 10,000 cases. We never should have intervened. But if we didn't, we would have got to 10,000 cases.
Yeah, are those things tough to prove? Because I was looking at the data I say data. Is that okay? I know you say
Yeah,
data, but
sure, that's fine.
I'm a data guy. But I see stats, especially in the States, where it's like there's certain places that were loose on restrictions, and there were places that were really tight on restrictions. And not a lot of cases, but in some cases, I've noticed that they're negligible, the differences between them. So this is why monkeys like me get confused, because what works and what doesn't, and is COVID just like this chameleon virus where it's like it doesn't necessarily have a consistent way of spreading in different areas. Like help this monkey understand, because I'm very confused as to why different places that do different things often have the same results.
Yeah. So I think, one thing that we hear a lot of is look at Florida, look at Florida, look at Florida. I think that's been a very, very common theme. Well, the one thing that we know about geographically with Florida is that you're more likely to be doing like outdoor activities than you are in, let's say, Northern Ontario or really anywhere throughout Ontario. So that's the, first kind of a factor. And we have learned throughout this pandemic that outdoors is safer. Therefore, just knowing that on a baseline, if you wanted to control rates in Ontario and also Florida, you'd have to do more in Ontario than you would in Florida to have the exact same impact. Now, how do we measure the impact? Well, you can look at things that you can't really disagree with, and that would be like mortality rate per 100,000 people, let's say. And we know that in Florida right now, it's 3 times higher than here in Ontario when you look at the actual mortality rate. And once again, if we had the exact same interventions, our cases would have gone up more. So just because they're 3 times higher with mortality rate doesn't mean that we did 3 times more to intervene. In fact, we would have to do more to intervene once again, just to bring it back to that same level. So when we kind of, compare some of these places, it becomes very, very challenging because they're not at that exact same geographic level. The other thing to definitely keep in mind is that when we look at the US, they have a totally different healthcare system than here. And when we intervene here, especially in Ontario, where we don't have the best healthcare system when it comes to healthcare capacity, and I don't think there's a person in Ontario who would disagree with me now, we don't have good healthcare capacity here in Ontario. We can't sustain the same kind of a jump that you could in, let's say, New York City, Florida, or some of these other places where they have like ICU capacity. And the reason that we intervene is because we wanted to maintain healthcare capacity. And it's a different approach you need to take in Florida than what you need to take here. But what we do know is that whatever Florida has done, despite being warmer, despite having more outdoor activities, they have a death rate per capita 3 times higher than here in Ontario.
Yeah, and speaking of Ontario, where are we now? The in the ether, I would say the public believes that the most general talking point that I think the public probably believes is that Omicron is a lot more contagious and a lot less deadly. Is that fair?
That's fair to say, for sure. Yeah.
And so does that mean that, and listen, a year ago, people were like, there's light at the end of the tunnel. We'll be out of this in a couple months. I know that predicting long-term is really difficult, but are there experts that are like, no, for real this time, I swear, we're seeing light at the end of the tunnel. Is that where we're at? Or is there, because I heard for a day or two about this Omicron B12 or something like the BA2 or something about, and then it can survive on surfaces, and everyone was scared for an hour and a half. And then now I haven't heard about that again. So.
Yeah. And that's it. And that's, one spot that I've been very, very critical of individuals that make projections that, this is our last wave. We're not going to have any more waves. And I think that's a very, very dangerous thing to claim because we don't know what's right around the corner. We thought that same thing, at least some experts did, right before Delta hit us. If we think back to last March, a lot of people said, we're going to vaccine our way out of this. And then Delta came around and it simply didn't happen. Then we said, look, we're done with it. It's not going to happen again. Then Omicron hit us. And I think that's what happens is that we've seen these variants pop up. And we're going to continue to see these variants pop up, especially with so many countries really giving up on the fight now when it comes down to COVID-19. And that's really why, like Omicron, they came from South Africa. They didn't have the best testing ability. We look at, like
This
Denmark,
is the graphic that you sent me. This is sorry, just for the people who can't see or want to know what this is. This is the data from Denmark, and what correlated with the spike there? What change in policy correlated with that spike there at the end?
Yeah. So first off, they were able to sort of battle that original kind of Omicron strain, but then when BA2 came around, they said, look, we're finished with the original Omicron strain. Therefore, we don't need to worry about this anymore. And then they simply removed restrictions. And it's scary because right now, Denmark has the highest per capita cases in the whole entire world. Their hospitalization is on an upward trend. And that's when they decided to remove all restrictions. And what we know is that when you remove all restrictions, when you stop testing, when you stop doing those things, that's where other variants pop up. And that's why it's very, very tough to say, there's light at the end of the tunnel forever. There may be light at the end of the tunnel when it comes down to the Omicron variant, but not overall, because more variants will inevitably pop up, hopefully less contagious and not as severe. I think we all hope that, but we simply don't know.
Where do you go from here? I've talked to so many people in the last month, and I'm one of them, where I am doing something totally different now because of this pandemic. And it was definitely the pandemic that made me, concentrate on podcasting and writing. And I got a book deal. Karima, has gone out with her camera. She was a lawyer who all of a sudden the pandemic put her in a direction. I feel like you're kind of the same. Like, the pandemic has sort of given you like a purpose during this pandemic. Is there like a big demand for biostatisticians in the real world? And what do you see yourself doing?
There is, yeah. Like I've been working with a whole bunch of Fortune 500 companies for quite some time now. A lot I can't say their names under NDAs, but there's a lot of companies that really want you to look at the data, and it's simply gone from just simply being medical data and like COVID-19 stuff to actually making a pathway out of this, to also looking at let's say retail data and saying, look, you know what, here are the retail numbers for this country, for this place over here. What are things, we're able to do? So kind of a fresh set of eyes who's looking at data from, let's say, the retail environment that isn't in the actual retail environment himself. So that's what a lot of it has basically moved to, is just simply interpreting data and then coming up with next step with a fresh set of eyes.
And so where are we going to be in a week? Like, what do the numbers tell you? And a month, like what is the immediate future based on policies that are currently enacted or that are about to be?
Yeah. So I think in the next few days, we're going to start to see the impact of really the reopenings that we had these last few weeks. I'd say in like the next maybe 3 or 4 days, we can start to monitor the reproduction value, and we can see how many individuals one person with COVID is actually infecting. So if that value stays around 1, then we're going to basically be like plateauing. In other words, hospitalizations will stay the same, mortality rates will stay the same, and all that stuff. So that's something which is going to really, really change over these next few weeks, because I believe the next step here in Ontario is February 21st, but we won't get any really good data to see the impact of that reopening until the start of March. So really, it's not easy to tell weeks in advance when you introduce new interventions. It's just basically an intervention gets introduced, but then look at the data 2 weeks after the intervention, maybe even 10 days, and you can get a really good hint of where things are going. With that being said, where are things going now? Well, we are not declining as fast as we were before we kind of reopened everything, but we are still declining. In other words, I think right now the reproduction value is around 0.9. In other words, 100 people would infect 90 people in about 3 days. So our numbers are still dropping, but they're not dropping as fast, which is still fine as long as that reproduction value is under 1, and as long as those values are actually dropping, we're in a good state.
Weren't they right around 3, like 6 weeks ago or something?
I believe,
2.9 or something?
Yeah, like depending on your method on how you actually calculated that value, I believe at one time just the Omicron variant itself was at like 4.4, which is unbelievable. But then it outcompeted Delta. We really got the news out there that this was a very, very contagious variant. And we really started selling people on these N95 and then the K95 masks. We finally started to acknowledge that COVID-19 is airborne. It's always been airborne, but it sort of gave the government an excuse to say, well, now it's airborne with the Omicron variant, but it wasn't airborne before. So now we can take precautions, but here's why we didn't before.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like I was trying to tell that to Bernier about how a fluid situation. I mean, that doesn't even come close to describing what this entire saga was. And you know, I have a question that just popped into my head for you. Why do you engage with the people that fuck with you?
That's a good question. Well, you know what? See, really what it comes down to is the way like Twitter works is you can see other people's responses. And the dangerous thing with that is that if somebody hijacks one of your threads and they have a lot of followers themselves, and they start to like those comments and things like that, the Twitter algorithms are going to put their responses at the very, very top. So then the second somebody sees my data, right underneath it, they'll see somebody's boneheaded interpretation of what's going on. And what you'll see underneath that is the most common response to that, which I want that response to be mine. So at least I'm able to respond to that person who is making those boneheaded comments. And just simply not saying anything means that those comments stay there, they're unchecked. And I have a really, really big problem with not checking people when they're passing on misinformation. And I think the mainstream media has that exact same problem with fact-checking people that are constantly spreading misinformation.
Yeah, it's funny because I look at my analytics a lot on Twitter and I look at that far column, the engagement rate. Whenever I'm just like an awful piece of shit, that engagement rate is like through the roof. You know, like, yeah. And it's like, fuck, because you want people to know who you are, but it's like, fine, I'll call you a cunt. Jesus Christ. like, you know, not literally, well, sometimes, but, and that makes it frustrating, especially because when your business, and mine certainly is not, is math, you know, like it as a math guy, you're like, well, more people will see true data if I call you an asshole, right? And then they come. That's got to be a little bit frustrating.
It is.
Or do you like it? Or do you like it? Is there a part of you that's like, you know what? I fucking like it.
Well, it's been nice being called on to give opinions about data. And I think that's, you know, really what's different from what I kind of intended to do from the start, which is simply stick out those numbers and not really comment on them. But then, as I said, once I saw people hijacking my numbers and having it to fit their false narrative, then I slowly started going into a point that I'll actually, interpret this data for people. And then once you start to interpret data, then, you know, someone's like, well, this person said this. Then you get into that more opinion area. And, you know, it's been interesting at times giving opinions about things. I mean, that's really what my work is outside of social media, is simply looking at data and giving opinions on things, looking at things critically and saying, here's what you can do with the data. Here's what I think you can do with the data. And I think, you know, that's something which I moved to that I never thought I would have to move to. I simply thought, as you said, here's the numbers, here's the graphs, and then you just go at it.
Yeah, I mean, like, my wife was a research. I think she was like the research manager of Nestle Canada, and then before that, Johnson & Johnson. Don't send me hate mail. I know they're fucked up with the water. But they, you know, she was telling me last night, in my anticipation of interviewing you, I was telling her about you, and she was like, yeah, she was like, some of her most rewarding times working at Nestle was listening, or actually it was Diageo back in the day when she started, and she was like, she would listen to all these, like, what she calls whizzy stats guys, and like how they have so many variables and so many different ways of coming up with insights, and then eventually predictor models that would be based on some of the most random shit, but they would always be bang on. And that's what I find interesting. It's like alchemy, but it works. You guys are spinning gold from numbers. You know what I mean?
You're right. There are so many variables, and I think that's where, sort of data scientists, biostatisticians come into play, is that they understand that if one number goes up, it's not because of one reason. For instance, we know like blood pressure may be different from one person to the next. That's not because of one single gene. There are literally thousands of genes that help control blood pressure. And it's the exact same thing when it comes down to like case counts as well. There's thousands of variables that impact case counts. And I think really why there's been a lot of disagreement when it comes down to COVID-19 is, okay, well, we know that thousands of variables affect COVID-19 rates. Which variables do you think we should tweak that would have the biggest impact on like bringing down cases? Should we tweak 10 of these minor ones, or should we tweak these 2 major ones? And I think that's where a lot of disagreement comes into play. You're not going to please, even one person all the time. I'm certain that,
because it sounds like social engineering a little bit, doesn't it?
Yeah. And you know what? And that, like, of the like 88,000 followers I have right now, I can tell you there's no way there's one single follower that has agreed with every single thing that I have said. Absolutely not. Because you're right. There's so many different factors. And it's like, what things do we have to do in order to bring down cases? Schools, let's say, and that's, been one area, and it's been so black and white. It's been schools are open or schools are closed. And we didn't look at this kind of a gray area where it's like, well, you know what? Let's maybe send high school kids in 2 days a week, 1 week, and then 3 days the other week. We don't find this gray area. And I think that's where I've sort of specialized this last little bit, is finding this like gray area, not making things black and white, but finding this area in between that nobody's really talking about.
Yeah. Well, listen, man, you do a great job at it. And I enjoy your snark. If you're good at math, you should just allow it to be a little salty. I think that's
I agree.
Yeah. Listen, man, thank you very much for coming on the show. I learn a lot when you come on, and when you've been on Dean's podcast a few times, and I'll probably not retain any of the information that you gave me today, but it's good because I have you on my Twitter feed all the time. So
Absolutely.
Ryan Imgrund, thanks, buddy. I really appreciate it.
See you. Take care.
That was a fun show. There was a moment where I was thinking about putting Max and Ryan on at the same time, and I just sort of decided not to. And I'm a bit of a control freak. I think that's what it is. I like one-on-one interviews. I'm interviewing, hopefully sometime in the next 2 weeks, Ryan Lindley, one of our inner circle guys here at Dean Blundell, at the Dean Blundell Network, and I preempted him by saying, I want to interview your wife separately because 2 at a time just doesn't feel right. I'm going to have to watch that Maxime Bernier interview or listen to it and see if there's any changes that I would have made, because I enjoyed our conversation. I always enjoy talking to him. And guys, I don't think he's a white supremacist. I think that he knows that a certain percentage of his support is propped up by them, and he doesn't like to talk about that. I guess I can understand why. But I don't think he's ever going to get the expanded support that he wants if he doesn't find a way to say, fuck you, not, white supremacist people, don't bother voting for me. But politicians are, they value votes, right? They value votes more than they want to identify with the ethics of every voter that votes for them. So we'll see how it goes. The convoy is still happening. A bunch of people are causing a bunch of shit, and we are starting to feel it in our economy, and we'll see how that goes. Stay tuned for the Dean Blundell show at 3-ish, because we never start on time. And thanks for joining us. Really appreciate it, guys.